your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
Welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. I'm going to start off the broadcast with Russia, Ukraine, Crimea, airliner shot down, or supposedly shot down. Simple fact is we're getting propaganda for both sides. We really don't know the truth as of now. Probably won't for a decade or so. People always, want to ask me, what do you think about, Russia or Ukraine? What side do you want to pick? And it's kind of like I don't support either side. It's one of those things where what I see is two competing powers and a whole bunch of people stuck in the middle of it. Same with Israel and Gaza. You got two competing powers and a whole bunch of people stuck in between it. I support freedom, and unless either side's truly calling for freedom, how can I support them? I can support a ceasefire, but most of the time those don't ever work out. Therefore, they're basically useless. We have to shed the idea of needing people to govern over you. People are like, oh, religion tells you that you should follow government, and I think if you're going to even look at it from a biblical type sense, God gave you free will, government, to govern the mind. He gave you free will to govern the mind. Only you can govern your own mind, and if you believe in God, you follow God, whatever God you believe in. And if you don't believe in God, you still have free will to govern your own mind, make up your own decisions, and as long as it's not affecting others, you really don't have any say. But a lot of stuff that's come out about it, I really don't believe most of it. Ron Paul had commented on it and basically said that, we shouldn't be rushing to judgment, which is completely true because we really don't know the facts. Which a lot of people go, oh, yeah, Ron Paul works for Russia, as most people that don't support Ukraine tend to be called, oh, you're one of those Russian supporters. No, I don't have to support Ukraine just to not support Russia. How about this? I don't support either one. And honestly, that's the business of the people that live there. It's them that need to stand up for their own rights. And I'm not going to sit there and play the political game back and forth. But Stefan Molyneux tackled the question, are Ron Paul and Vladimir Putin best friends? So I'm going to go ahead and cue this up.
Hi everybody, Stefan Molyneux from Freedom in Radio. Hope you're doing well. Oh! Defying absolutely zero stereotypes of female emotional reasoning. There's a reporter for the National Journal who has written an article entitled, Ron Paul is Putin's new best friend. BFF journalism forever. Oh, the credibility just oozes from her like the sweat from the belly fat of Jabba the Hutt after a particularly strenuous cross-training mission. So, this is what she writes. She says, it used to be that blaming America for the crisis abroad was largely the province of liberals. That folk wisdom appears to be changing. Just ask Ron Paul. In the days after the downing of Malaysia Airlines Flight 17, the former House member has been quick to attack the West and President Obama for pointing any fingers in the direction of Russian President Vladimir Putin. So let's just close our eyes, hold our nose, and steel ourselves to the sticking place and sink into the ooze of this neuro-linguistic hell. So the first person to use the word blame loses. It's like the first person to use the word bashing. Oh, this is just U.S. bashing. These have no intellectual content whatsoever. Blame is one of these words, we don't want to play the blame game. It's one of these words that people use when they just want to manipulate you emotionally. Blame is something that is automatically immature, is automatically subjective, is automatically projecting, is automatically emotionally driven and irrational. So the first person who uses the word blame, again, without specific and objective evidence, has just lost both the debate and any shred of intellectual credibility from anyone with more than a marbles bag worth of brain cells rolling around their cranium. So blaming America for crisis abroad was largely the province of liberals. That folk wisdom, you see, it's folk wisdom that America has anything to do with any crisis abroad in any way, shape, or form. It's just folk wisdom. There's no truth behind it, neither is there any falsehood behind it. What is there? Well, there's just the words folk wisdom. What do they mean? Nothing! There's no content whatsoever, so automatically it's like, steel yourself. It's sort of like there's this experiment in modern art where they get this monkey to throw paint into the jet stream of a jet that is currently firing its engines at a canvas. Well, the article is the engine, the words are the paint, and we just got to steel ourselves, put on our hazmat suit, and try and wade through it. The former House member has been quick to attack. You see, there's emotionally laden language again. Boy, I was reading this score. I hope that a man wrote this. Please don't be such a stereotypical female perspective. But this time it was not to be escaped. Quick to attack. See, is that an argument? Well, quick to attack indicates emotional instability and aggression and irrationality and bigotry. No intellectual content, just quick to attack. The West and President Obama for pointing any fingers in the direction of Russian President Vladimir Putin. So, in this case, Ron Paul has been attacking the West and attacking President Obama for the mere act of pointing any fingers in the direction of Putin. But let's find out what actually happened. Ron Paul wrote, just days after the tragic crash of a Malaysian Airlines flight over eastern Ukraine, Western politicians and media joined together to gain the maximum propaganda value from the disaster. It had to be Russia. It had to be Putin, they said. He goes on to write, President Obama held a press conference to claim, even before an investigation, that it was pro-Russian rebels in the region who were responsible. His ambassador to the UN, Samantha Power, did the same thing at the UN Security Council just one day after the crash. Well, first of all, Samantha Power, excellent Marvel Comics superhero name, but what is the problem with that? Well, these are just off the top of my head, but U.S. intelligence, the CIA, the FBI, the U.S. intelligence worldwide, not got the very best record in the known universe for getting things right. Just off the top of my head. They cracked the Japanese naval codes prior to Pearl Harbor. They knew what they were sending. They were warned that an attack was imminent, and yet Pearl Harbor took the U.S. entirely by surprise. You know, if you ring an island dependent on natural resources that it can't produce internally, like oil, with a blockade, they're going to attack you because they have no other particular choice. Did they get Pearl Harbor right? Absolutely not. At some point, if I remember rightly, some superpower invaded Afghanistan and got swamped down in a bog-like war that sucked the very living soul out of the entire domestic population and did a huge job to collapse the economy. Some superpower invading Afghanistan to the detriment of its entire empire. Oh! No, it was USSR! So close. Just 2 letters off from what I was thinking. The USSR, and did the CIA, anyone overseas, anyone figure out that Russia was about to invade Afghanistan? No, they didn't. Did they predict, right? So the Cold War started, of course, after you allied with the Russians in the Second World War. And what happened? You had a multi-decade life-or-death struggle between the remnants of capitalism and the excesses of communism. Public enemy number one, the hammer and sickle bastards who were going to walk all over and bury us and stomp their hobnailed boots into our children's foreheads. They are enemy number one. That's kind of the point of the whole overseas intelligence operation, to figure out what's going on with Russia. Did they have any idea that Russia was going to collapse? No clue at all. In fact, right before Russia collapsed, they said, Russia's super strong. Oh, wait, no, it's gone. So, yes, they might have missed out about, little Iranian revolution that occurred, Ayatollah Khomeini kidnapping, held the U.S. embassy members for 444 days or something like that. Right before the Iranian Revolution, in the 70s, the CIA said, there's no evidence of any imminent revolution, none whatsoever, in Iran. 9/11. Any advance warning, any particular preparation, any particular, right? Nothing whatsoever. Colin Powell at the UN talked about where all of Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction were. It was a slam dunk that he had weapons of mass destruction. Actually, turns out not so much with the weapons of mass destruction. Anyway, we could go on and on with all this kind of stuff, but let's just go on with the article. So the fact that Ron Paul might be just a little skeptical about American intelligence, American overseas intelligence, which is a 3-part triple patty oxymoron, is somewhat understandable if you know anything about American history other than what is taught about in Roo, Sis, Boom, Bah American patriotic textbooks. Well, so when Obama says, oh yeah, it's Putin, it's got to be, we know. Well, nonsense. Excuse me. So Ron Paul's argument, says the article, which he first made in a Friday television appearance, was quickly picked up by the Kremlin-funded English-language outlet Russia Today. Hi, RT. And on Monday, the permanent mission of Russia to NATO, a group tasked with facilitating cooperation between Russia and NATO, tweeted out his column. Well, I think that's quite reasonable. You see, one of the things that Ron Paul appears to be suggesting, let's go a little bit further. One thing that Ron Paul is clearly stating is, until there's an investigation, let's not assume we know who is to blame. Let's not assume we know who is responsible, is probably a better word than blame. Well, there is, pretty much a multi-millennia Anglo-Saxon common law tradition called innocent until proven guilty. Just point fingers in a complex international situation and say, that guy, go get him. This is not the opening to the movie Shrek. This is questions of force and war. And so it may be a fairly good idea to say, let's not assume we know who's to blame, given that our intelligence is fundamentally retarded. Let's not assume we know who to blame until there's an investigation. That's actually not pointing fingers at people. That's trying to talk down a lynch mob, right? Remember this lynching thing? Trying to talk down a lynch mob is not the same as pointing fingers at someone. You're trying to lower not other people's fingers, but their possible weaponry from a possibly innocent party. Okay, so it's easy to see why these Russians, says this woman, liked the peace. Politically, it's a much sounder line of argument for protecting Russia from blame than what's being reported on Russian TV, much of which is funded by the Kremlin. Oh yeah, can you imagine a government having inordinate control over media outlets, say by providing them with information and sources and actually giving them ads made by the government to run as if they're not made by the government? Shocking. Never happens in the West. Where conspiracy theories abound. See, saying someone's responsible before there's even an investigation is not just a conspiracy theory where they say this is what I think happened or what might have happened or what is claimed to have happened certainly didn't happen. That's called a conspiratard fact. That's called rank bigotry. One report, this is a report from Russia, promotes the idea that the airliner was already full of corpses when it took off from Amsterdam. Well, tragically for this woman, somebody who works for Free Domain Radio speaks Russian. And so we had a look at the original article. This is not even remotely true. And it's not even a stretch of the truth. This is an outright lie. So this woman is saying one report promotes the idea that the airliner was already full of corpses when it took off from Amsterdam. We read this report. The report actually says there's a lot of crazy conspiracy theories. One which is impossible to believe is that an airliner took off with bodies already in the seats. So they're saying, whoa, there's a lot of crazy conspiracy theories about there. One which is impossible to believe is this. And then, according to this woman's, I guess we could call it a brain. Okay, let's call it a brain. This woman's brain interprets that website saying these are crazy conspiracy theories which can't be believed, as it's promoting the idea that the airliner was already full of corpses when it took off from Amsterdam. Another claims the tragedy was somehow mysteriously the result of the Ukrainian military confusing the airliner for Putin's presidential plane. The putting the word mysteriously in doesn't make it mysterious at all. So anyway. So here's Russia expert Julia Eiffel, and she says, watching some of these Russian newscasts, one comes away with the impression of a desperate defense attorney scrounging for experts and angles, or a bad kid caught red-handed by the principal trying to twist his way out of a situation in which he has no chance. Well, that's some great analysis there. I wish you hadn't been another woman. Please stop reconfirming these stereotypes. One comes away with the impression that, is that what experts do? I thought experts actually dealt in facts and evidence. Like, why not quote me something that's just not an outright lie? Why not quote me something where they're double talking or twisting or changing their story in midair with no reference to it being changed? One comes away with the impression that, I mean, this is like going to a bank and saying to the teller, I came away from my last bank statement with the impression that I had $1 million. Could I have them, please? Show me some numbers, show me some facts. One came away with the impression that it's like a desperate defense attorney and a kid who's good in a school. Is this seriously what passes for journalism these days, you prostitutes? Not that any of the outlandish coverage is particularly useful to Putin. Oh, so he's aiding Putin, but in a way that doesn't aid him. As David Remnick recently wrote, Putin has become something of a victim of his own propaganda machine. Unlike the National Journal, I suppose. The wild exaggeration on nightly broadcasts has, quote, become a problem for Putin because this system cannot be wholly managed. Gleb Pavlovsky, a former Putin advisor, told Remnick of the Russian media, the news programs have overheated public opinion and the collective public imagination. What does that mean? Would you actually like to provide any evidence? She goes on to write, never mind that Secretary of State John Kerry, in his blanket appearances on the Sunday talk shows, was careful not to directly blame Putin for the disaster, noting that culpability is a judicial term. Sorry, that should have actually put you to sleep. Culpability is a judicial term. Kerry did note an enormous amount of evidence suggesting that Russia provided the separatists in eastern Ukraine with the weapons used to shoot down the airliner last week. He did, however, assign the Kremlin some blame for fueling conflict in eastern Ukraine and arming separatists with military equipment. So John Kerry feels that it's really terrible for governments, you see, to fuel conflict in Ukraine. The fact that America has pumped $5 billion into its own particular favored parties in the conflict over the past number of years, apparently that's not a destabilizing thing. The fact that America is one of the biggest arms dealers in the world, I'm sure, does nothing to inflame conflicts around the world. And arming separatists with military equipment? I wonder if America has ever done that at all. Yes, I think it has. But that didn't dissuade Ron Paul, from attacking American officials for supposedly jumping to conclusions. Okay, so John Kerry says we can't establish that Putin, that it's his responsibility. So that's exactly what Ron Paul is saying, right? And now, again, I'm sorry to put your brain through this, because normally this is the kind of triple twister way that a intestinal snake winds its way around your lower belly. But when Ron Paul says about Obama, don't jump to conclusions, you can't say for sure he's guilty, that's bad. But when John Kerry does it, that's good. So it's good when John Kerry agrees with Ron Paul, who's saying something wrong. Deal with it if you can, if you dare. This is like being strapped to a table with O'Brien above you. After outlining everything that Western media outlets in their rush to repeat government propaganda have ignored, Paul posited that, quote, the real point is it's very difficult to get accurate information. Yes, it is very difficult to get accurate information. Is it so hard to simply demand a real investigation, Ron Paul asks. He also, in his Friday interview on Newsmax, drew parallels between the Russian-made missile system's alleged connection to Thursday's attack and the capture of U.S.-made weapons by Islamist insurgents in Iraq, arguing where the missiles were originally manufactured is relatively meaningless. Paul says, that may well be true, but guess what? ISIS has a lot of American weapons. We sent weapons into Syria to help the rebels, and Al-Qaeda ends up getting it. It doesn't mean that our American government and Obama deliberately wanted ISIS to get American weapons, right? So if it turns out to be the case that it was Russian separatists in Ukraine who fired the missile, hopefully mistaking the passenger plane, the civilian plane for a military transport, or maybe even Putin's plane, who knows? If it turns out that the missiles were manufactured in Russia, well, that's not good, for sure, and it doesn't make the Russian government look good. But if you're the U.S., you really can't be pointing any fingers, because so many American-made weapons have ended up in the hands of people who America considers enemies. I mean, I assume that Russia, to some degree, views the Russian separatists in Ukraine as allies, or at least as brothers divided by all of the geographical hiccups and accidents of the Second World War. But it doesn't mean that then somehow Putin is to blame. Or if it does, then we've got an international court of trials for war crimes that is going to pretty much suck up everyone who's ever been in charge of a country and has ever had a gun that has ended up in someone else's hands, which is everyone. So basically, we're just going to have a giant frat house reunion party of the G7, of NATO, of Russia, of China, of everyone else whose weapons have surprisingly not stayed in the invisible conceptual moon-based spider web of, ooh, these weapons have to stay with our friends. That never happens. So that's, I think, his point, if I may paraphrase it. So who gets the weapons, says Paul, so who gets the weapons is a big difference between how they got them and what happened and what the motivations were. So even if it was a Russian weapon, that doesn't mean a lot. Okay, yeah. I mean, didn't they have a Fast and Furious where they gave marked weapons to drug gangs in Mexico, which ended up being used to kill Americans? Is that something which we now must impeach for? Well, Putin's own talking points, says the article, have been more subdued. In an address published online overnight, the Russian president calls for an international investigation of the crash site, adding, Russia will do everything possible to shift the current conflict in the east of Ukraine from today's current military stage to the stage of discussion at the negotiation table. With his cool, dispassionate rhetoric, Paul seems to be just about the best voice for Putin's interests anywhere, and better surely than Kremlin TV. Paul is a more respected source, in America anyway, and his defense of Putin wasn't grounded in conspiracy theories. Still, he may have to compete with Alan West for the title of Putin's best new friend. And there, I assume because the last brain cell committed seppuku and wished to die rather than keep typing, the article ends. And this is big heap plenty pitiful. There's no very facts in here, no facts in here really, just a bunch of slurs and emotionally manipulative language and eek. I would like to continue, but I'm afraid I'm going to have a some sort of borax-based scrub of my frontal lobes so that I can resume doing philosophy rather than face planting into the absolute venom-filled sophistic bowl of this particular article. But thank you so much for watching. I will talk to you soon.
Stefan Molyneux, YouTube. Check out all our videos he has. He tackles a lot of the libertarian philosophy, and then he goes into other philosophy, parenting and all that, and ways to basically take that same way you approach your libertarian ideology and applying that to your everyday life. There's definitely a difference. Libertarianism is looking at fighting a political system that is oppressive, and it's to inspire self-governance and self-responsibility, the non-aggression principle, and getting to a truly free society. In a civilized society, because a civilized society would not need to be governed, and that doesn't mean that crime goes away, that there's not going to be people out there that, are going to do harm to you. There's still those crimes and stuff that happen, but we don't have this monopoly on force that has immunity, because, 51% decided that the other 49% should do certain things. One thing when you look at philosophy and, let's say the non-aggression principle, when you start applying that type of ideology into your personal life. Now, the, non-aggression, that principle, that philosophy of non-aggression, that's not unique to only libertarianism, because if you look at it like that, anybody that believes in non-aggression would be libertarian. While they might believe in non-aggression in their personal life, but they might be willing to go vote for someone to kick down your door and lock you up for a victimless crime because you live your life a certain way and they don't agree with it. Well, they might be, non-aggression principle in their personal life, but they didn't have a problem voting for someone to kick down your door, and that's because there's that disconnect where they're not the ones kicking down your door and ruining your life. So it's easy for them to vote for it. And then we know by many whistleblowers and things to come out showing that, well, the police forces try not to, hire anybody with too much intelligence because they do want just do as I say. Now, that's not to say that there's not intelligent cops out there. But I think there's a problem when not enough, officers out there are speaking up and speaking out against all the corrupt ones, because there's enough corrupt ones out there that there should be whole forces going, we're all going on strike unless this guy is removed. The problem is they're buddy and they're, hey, sorry, man, you snapped and you couldn't handle yourself, therefore I'm going to pity you and not speak out about you remaining on the police force. Because you can work through it. You get some help and you'll work through it. Maybe they'll be snapping more often because they're not really getting punished for getting mad. Does this, filter into some of the domestic violence and other things you see with some law enforcement officers, even some of the homicides? Is this because they've been able to act a certain way all day at work, and they've got this ego building that says, well, I have this badge and this gun, therefore I'm someone extremely, above average, therefore I have this moral authority to rule over you. And, well, you get away with that at work all the time, and then you go home and your wife questions everything you do and demands you do certain things. Is there a possibility that that type of mentality could snap on their own, loved ones? I think that, this is something that really should be looked at. Excuse me. I'm kind of debating on, I don't know. I want to play this clip, but I don't want to play that clip right after I played this other one. But I think I might just do that to get it out of the way, only because I was kind of talking about this, and I probably should have brought that whole issue up later about libertarianism and looking at it in your personal life, even though libertarianism is a certain spectrum. It looks like, yeah, Adam Kokesh put out one, says libertarianism, morality, and relationships. And it sounds like he will probably go into, if you can apply it in a relationship. And that's not something I've ever tackled, is the whole relationship in libertarianism. But like I was saying about, just like the officers that get away with acting, egotistically and abusive to people on the job, are they going to be more prone to, act violently towards loved ones when loved ones start demanding that they do things and question what they do when they work all day and they're taught not to be questioned. And if people question you, you better, put your foot down and show them you're the authority. And I think that mentality in law enforcement could definitely play a factor in their personal lives. And, you gotta look at bettering yourself, and if you're law enforcement and you notice you're acting this way, I think I would be questioning it. And that's why applying that non-aggression principle maybe in your personal life and I'm not going to go after someone with a doobie. I'm not going to go after someone that, just left the bar, might be a little tipsy, and, I might go up and say, hey, can I call you a taxi? Where do you live? Do you live far? Can, make sure you get home safe? Instead of going, hey, public intox, we're going to arrest you and fine you a whole bunch of money and use you as a revenue slave. So, different ways of applying it, I think, is crucial, and be interesting on his take of libertarianism and relationships.
Writes, libertarianism, morality, and relationships. Dear Adam, I am part of the minority of women in the libertarian movement, and I have a woman question that if you cannot answer, I'm sure you can point me in the right direction to finding that answer. Well, we shall see. I understand that the philosophy behind libertarianism stems from self-ownership and how that plays into a set of political ideas that allows the most freedom. I also believe that libertarianism, in its philosophy, provides a set of moral ideas as well from which we can construct our social interactions. The reason I wonder if you may have an answer to my question is that your activism relates mostly to the former, by the way. Thank you for what you do. You're very welcome. So, this is absolutely true. And the important thing to keep in mind here in terms of like the scope of libertarianism, like I'm a lot more than a libertarian, and what we present on Adam versus the Man is a lot more than strict libertarianism, but libertarianism really does not address anything beyond self-ownership, the non-aggression principle, and interpersonal violence. So if you're not violating someone else's property or their body or their rights, essentially, then that's all libertarianism itself has to address. But there are some really cool other implications of this in terms of personal relationships. And I just want to point out, if that makes you a libertarian, then in their daily lives, almost everybody's a libertarian. I mean, how many people got up this morning and were like, gee, to make my income today, I think I'm just going to point a gun at some people and threaten to lock them in a cage and steal from them. No, most people just go about their days respecting the rights of others, not stealing, not doing violence. So, in a sense, like we've already got this covered socially. People are good people. They're very libertarian, generally speaking, in their personal lives. But you can go a lot further with this in terms of applying the exciting principles of libertarianism and of capitalism, of free exchange, of self-ownership, of cooperative, mutually beneficial relationships. So my question is, how does libertarian philosophy encompass interpersonal relationships? I understand that consensual sex between adults is not considered immoral, including dramatically sarcastic, dirty gay sex, since we have the right to consent. But what about stepping out of bounds on a relationship, or being the one who is on the side, the low-life harlot? How much merit does entering a consensual and committed relationship hold in and outside of the relationship? Now, this is like getting into a lot of personal preference stuff, like how much merit does entering the relationship hold? It's really up to you. And see, this is the other cool thing about libertarianism that does have a lot more broad implications. Because if libertarianism says that when someone does something wrong or something that you don't like, your only legitimate response is to disassociate, or your really only remedy is to say, I don't want to be with this person anymore, I don't want this relationship to continue, then you can walk away and you can tell them why, or you can continue in that relationship and tell them why you don't like it and say, well, hey, if this continues, I'm going to stop. And the only time that it's appropriate to use force is in, immediate defense of life or limb, or, hypothetically justified in terms of property, although I would make the case very rarely is that practically justified, or in terms of value maximized, is it justified. So the flip side of this is sort of like, okay, so if you're justified using force in this situation, then you're not yet justified using force against an individual in any other situation. And the reason that's so exciting is that this concept of disassociation or boycott becomes a universal, powerful tool that, in a sense, we already use extensively and don't really properly appreciate or understand the significance of, because when you choose to say, buy your groceries at Ralph's, you're making the choice to not buy your groceries at Trader Joe's or at Whole Foods. And if that's the choice you're making, you're essentially disassociating from Trader Joe's and Whole Foods. I mean, they're right there. You could associate with them. And you're saying, no, I'm going to get my groceries from Ralph's instead. I wouldn't recommend that. I would go with one of the other two, especially if you care about clean organic food in general. But there's a much broader way then that this can be applied if you see it as choice of association. And the implication is that you can be assertive about who you invite into your life and how, and defining those relationships when your right to walk away is respected at any time. So, if you don't like what a company is doing because they're spoiling some environmental resources that you appreciate, or they're using child labor, you can choose to disassociate, and that's a much more effective tool than violence in the first place. So that has a lot of implications for personal relationships as well. Gina goes on. From how I see things now, I would argue that someone who has entered a social contract, such as a committed and monogamous relationship, holds a responsibility to the other partner to not cheat as part of the social contract. Now, here's where I like what you're saying as someone who appreciates monogamous relationships myself. I mean, that's so far been my preference. And this idea of a social contract is a real problem, real big problem. Because, like, say you're dating someone and you have an understanding of what the relationship is based on the social contract. Like, your parents just always told you as a dude, well, no, a woman is expected to cook and clean and make babies, and that's the social contract. And the social contract is a bullshit myth that individuals come up with or impose on other people. So it's really important to understand that, because if you date a woman who's like, no, I want to work and we're going to hire a maid, or if you're not working, dude, you're going to be the one cooking, cleaning, doing dishes, and if we can, we'll have you make the babies too. But, this is like, there is no social contract. It is a myth or a way of describing in binding terms what is a loose set of social expectations. It's a very important distinction. So if I were to say, hey, according to social expectations, you're the woman in this relationship, I'm going to pick you up for our first date and I'm going to pay for it. And I have that expectation for myself because of whatever gender bias my society has expressed to me. And, I go and do that, then that's fine. But if someone says, hey, social contract, dude, if you don't pick up the girl, then, it's about her expectations. It's about her perception of the social expectations and what to expect of you. So, like, it's the social contract. It's funny that you mention it in the relationship context, because it's usually used in the government context to say, oh, no, you have to pay your taxes. Taxes aren't theft because according to the social contract, you have to submit to government. Bullshit. I didn't consent to that. I'm being forced into this relationship. And that's, when you see it that way, the relationship between two individuals, really should be a lot more explicit. And this is where people fuck up so bad. And I can tell you, from experience, because I fucked it up pretty bad myself. And you don't have to go sit down on your first date and be like, all right, so this is the first date. And if there's a second date, I'm expecting at that point that you're going to kiss me goodnight, and you're not going to see anyone else or go on any other dates. And if we sleep together after the third date, I'm going to consider it cheating on me if you look at another woman or man. Like, no, I mean, you don't have to be like that, but you shouldn't assume anything in a partner. You shouldn't assume those expectations. And like, I've been clear in relationships in the past, and the clearer that I've been, the better those relationships have worked out for me. And it's always when there's different expectations. And I mean, I can tell you this from friendships, from working relationships, when those expectations aren't clear, or like I come into an employment relationship and I hire someone and I have this expectation, hey, you're going to show up on time, and because I'm paying you, you're going to do what I say, and you're not going to talk shit about me behind my back. If I don't make those things clear, I mean, some of those are like really basic. Although in today's society, the standard of employment has gotten so low, like even then, you have to make those really explicit. I mean, some people would say, oh, I thought I could come into work anytime and being late wasn't a big deal. If you don't lay those expectations out, you're not going to get what you want. And in a way, life is kind of an ongoing journey of relating to other people and relating to the world by expressing your preferences and talking about your needs and getting what you want. And we all get better at that over time. So it's definitely a long-term kind of skill to develop. So let's see. Not to cheat as part of the social contract, but the person outside of the relationship who assists in the affair has not breached a social contract since that person did not consent to the contract. But then I ask, does the contract only exist under the right to consent, or does it go deeper than that? Now, there is no social contract. You get rid of that idea. It is a bad word. It is an inaccurate word to describe social expectations in a way to manipulate other people. You know what I'm saying? Like, if we have general expectations, but we didn't sign a contract, and then I go, oh, but we signed a contract, and you didn't sign a contract, it's like, whoa, what the hell are you talking about? So you're imposing your expectations on others just by virtue of using that construct. So, and this, someone asked me the other day, like, if someone cheats on someone in a relationship, who is more guilty? This is one of those sort of timeless relationship questions, right? Who's more guilty? The person who cheated on their partner, or the person who... I think the question is always asked to like make it to make it so that the person enticing them, seducing them, leading them away from their committed monogamous relationship, like it's their fault. And in a social sense, it could be irresponsible. But see, here's the thing: what is the violation there? Is it a violation of social expectations? It doesn't matter. Is it a violation of your expectations? And I would say it depends in this case. So, like, arbitrary situation: person A cheating on person B with person C. If person C doesn't know that A and B are in a relationship, then obviously there's no fault there. Now, person A obviously knows that he's in a relationship, she, and their commitment to the other person, if it's explicit and they said, hey, we're monogamous, I'm not going to cheat on you, and then they go and cheat on them, that's just being dishonest. That's a sort of breach of verbal contract, and I would say, it's not a violation of the non-aggression principle, but there you're talking about really clear deception and betrayal, and in that sense, an immoral behavior that I would strongly, condemn and say I would not want to stay in a relationship with someone that you cannot trust. And holy crap, it really boggles my mind. Although I have to say, I've been in not quite a cheating situation, but similar. So, like, I understand. And I know you're going, what the hell is that? And I'm going to tell you, I can't say for now. But maybe in a few years, that story will come out. So I understand that it's like, well, you cheated on me, but I still love you and want you back. That's really tough, because you can't trust a person then. It's like, and people put up with a lot of shit in relationships. So I understand. But now, if person C here knows that person A is in a relationship and helps them cheat in that sense, then you might say that there's a culpability. But it really doesn't matter, and it comes down to a matter of individual judgment. And it's not exactly a breach of trust if that person never entered into any kind of agreement themselves. So here's what it comes down to. Would you date someone, first of all, who's cheated on someone else? I would say no. And I've been pretty fortunate, and I've never cheated on anyone. The closest I've come was, you could call it cheating. I'll say by some interpretation. I was going to break up with someone, ended up hooking up with someone else, and then breaking up with them. But I didn't go back into the relationship and try to tell them that it didn't happen. I was totally open about it, and I didn't try to deceive them about it. And I was already, in a sense, I had already absolved myself of the contractual commitment there, if you will. So, and if you think I'm a scumbag for that, hey, don't date me. I'm okay with that. And if someone was dating me and was ready to break up and the relationship was already at that point and they were with someone else, I wouldn't hold it against them. So I would date someone who's done that. Would I date someone who I know just in a committed relationship just randomly cheated and was just like, oh, I don't really care about my commitment, I'm just going to go have sex with someone else? No, that is someone I would not want to date if I knew that about them. Now, if it was someone who said, if it was person C, would I date person C? Someone who had done that horrendous thing of tempting someone out of a relationship and encouraging that immoral behavior? Maybe. Depends if she's really hot or not. Yeah, that's kind of what it comes down to. Personal preference. All right, what kind of rights? All right. So here we go. Back to the email. If entering a social contract consists of giving part of your self-ownership to another person, I can see how it would be argued that having relations with a person in an interpersonal relationship would be a violation of the other partner's property rights. No, it's not. When what I mean is, it's entering a social contract is not giving your self-ownership to another person. If I have an employment contract with someone, that's a commitment to do something conditionally, not to allow you to claim ownership over me. That's a different concept. So you can have in a contract, like, I give up a part of my self-ownership. You can have elements of that, but that is not necessary in a relationship. I mean, a relationship is a commitment to someone else. You could call it contractual if you have a marriage agreement, a prenup, or just a marriage, not a license from the government, but maybe you make a vow at a wedding. That's a verbal contract, but that's all it is. And if that were so, both the cheating partner and the person on the side would be guilty of violating the property rights of the cheated. No. See, then you can't, as in a relationship, and this is really important. And I think if you're seeing it this way, Gina, you might be setting yourself up for some bad relationships, because you don't own a partner. You don't own a child. You don't own a romantic partner. You don't own your parents. You can't put it in that category. On top of that would mean that a divorce would be considered stealing the part of oneself that was given to another person. This idea, how I see it, directly goes against one of the biggest branches of the libertarian philosophy, self-ownership. Do we really give up part of our natural rights in order to form healthy relationships with other people? Not necessarily, but a lot of people do in very unhealthy, emotionally codependent ways. What kind of rights, according to libertarian philosophy, does one have to not be cheated on in a consensual and monogamous relationship? Wow. It's not about rights. It's about just respect for the relationship, the contract, the agreement. And it might be spoken, it might be unspoken, but there are a lot of dangers with unspoken contracts unless you have the kind of intimacy to be confident in them. While I understand that there is a social contract agreed upon by two parties, no, there is not. What exactly is being taken away from, or what right does it impede if a counterpart of the party breaches the contract? Gina, I love that you're thinking about it this way. I mean, this is really exciting. It raises a lot of important questions and a lot of points, but it also raises a lot of problems that I think a lot of libertarians typically fall into when they hear about the philosophy in the first place. And sometimes it's, I should ostracize and boycott people who don't who don't do what I like. And then sometimes you see, like, oh God, free-state projects. Oh man, a lot of libertarian activists go, oh well, this person once sneezed at me and didn't cover their mouth. ostracize them. I will never associate with them again. And you're just like, really? I mean, you got to get some freaking perspective in the first place. But it seems like you're doing the same thing here of trying to transpose libertarian theory and contract stuff and self-ownership philosophy into personal relationships in a way that misunderstands what is really a relatively simple concept and dynamic of, how to relate to another person with these values and, in a responsible way. So if responsibility is assumed on people to not engage with people in relationships, it could be argued that there is a lack of consent coming from the parties outside the social contract. For example, if a man who is married breaks a social contract to his wife by involving himself with another woman who is aware of his contract, both he and the other woman are guilty of breaking the same contract. No, you cannot break a contract to which you are not bound, unless you're talking about the social contract and imposing it on everybody else, which is a terrible, terrible idea. Of course, you could say maybe the social contract is just a framework. It's just a metaphor. And if saying that you violate, but again, it's a very bad, inaccurate one. So if you say the social contract is really just those expectations, if you fail to meet expectations, the consequence is that people aren't going to want to hang out with you anymore. Big surprise. The difference between the two of them, though, is that the man entered the contract consensually while the woman had no say in the contract but was still expected to respect it. Now, it's true. Like this is sort of a general expectation. But again, it's kind of contingent on the contract, and it becomes very subjective. So if I have a contract with someone else, it would be considered immoral for a third party to forcibly interfere with that contract and violate our rights to conduct business between ourselves as individuals. But it's not a violation for them to just come and talk to us. And what if the agreement is, I'm hiring you to kill somebody, like I'm a politician and I'm hiring a soldier to go to the other side of the world and kill strangers, and we have a contract. Although I should point out, when you're in the military, it's not a contract. They call it the enlistment document for a reason, because no one from the government signs it, and it doesn't even pretend to bind the government to anything. In the fine print it says, the terms of this document can be changed, revoked, or altered at any time without notifying any of the parties assigned to this. Yeah, joining the military is pretty sick. So if someone wanted to interfere with that, they could. So violating someone else's contract in that sense, or encouraging them to violate their contract, doesn't cross the same absolute threshold, but it could still be something that is bad that you don't want to support, and therefore you disassociate from the person doing it. As you can see, I haven't really reached through the thorough conclusions on the ideas behind the connection between self-ownership and relationships, and searching for articles on Google about the social morality behind libertarian philosophy has really only reiterated my views on the lack of morality behind government interactions and how interactions within capitalism should work. Well, if you're looking for social morality behind libertarian philosophy, that might be because you might be kind of short, because that's not really what you're looking for. And I think what you're looking for more is free market response to bad actors and theories of ostracism and boycott, and how those apply not just in moral situations, but in situations of personal choice preference, and how personal choice preference has various economic implications, not just for individual one-on-one relationships, but for the market and government at large. I really hope to hear from you regarding my questions, and thanks for taking the time to read through this, Gina. Gina, you're very welcome. But I should say, this is not a woman question. This is really a universal question. And if anything, I think the men in the movement would be pretty wise to consider these issues. And maybe if they did, there would not be so few women.
Nobody else is showing the IDs. Yeah, you got to show ID. So you're grabbing me?
And that's the problem. The decision-making matrix. Exercise your...
And again, that was from Adam Kokesh, YouTube. Okay, this one from Campaign for Liberty, breaking out at the Fed, moving in the House. Tomorrow, the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee will make up Representative Paul Brown's or markup, Representative Paul Brown's H.R. 24, the Federal Reserve Transparency Act, or Audit the Fed as it's better known. After gaining a majority of the House as co-sponsors for the third Congress in a row, this markup is an important step toward auditing Fed getting a vote on the House floor as a standalone bill. This is certainly great news that Campaign for Liberty's top legislative priority and Ron Paul's signature legislation is once again moving in the House. Now it's incumbent upon us to finish the job. They have a link here, sign a petition. So if you're interested in that, that just came across my news feed. I guess it came across a little bit ago, but campaignforliberty.org. I don't know if you heard this story. I'm getting this one out of Newser. I've seen it a couple other places. Couple could be fined $500 if they water their lawn. $500 if they don't. In this week's Damned If You Do, Damned If You Don't file, a Southern California couple received a letter from Glendora city officials threatening to fine them $500 if they don't get their sun-scorched brown lawn green again, reports AP, which Laura Whitney and Michael Cordy would gladly do, except for one thing. They could also be fined $500 if they water their lawn too much. They're currently only watering twice a week, with more than 80% of California in extreme drought, according to Los Angeles Times. So the State Water Board voted this week to implement emergency conservation plans and gave the okay to fine water wasters up to $500 a day. As the board's chairwoman noted, a brown lawn should be a badge of honor because it shows you care about your community. Someone tell that to City of Glendora. Despite the water conservation efforts, we wish to remind you that limited watering is still required to keep landscape looking healthy and green, reads the letter. It's sent to Whitney and Cordy, who were also told that they have 60 days to remedy the eyesore. Governor Jerry Brown pushed an executive order through in April that says homeowners associations can't penalize people for not watering lawns during conservation periods. But as AP notes, it doesn't keep local governments from doing so. In the meantime, residents are stuck trying to interpret the right thing to do. It's almost crazy because one agency is telling you one thing and another is forcing you to do the opposite, says an Anaheim resident who also got violation notices for not keeping her yard green. Welcome to government. This is exactly what you're going to get. They're going to do this because they're able to get money out of you no matter what. They'll put you in the catch-22. They do it to you every day. I forget what the statistic was, but how much of the population and how many crimes the population commits without even knowing it. And it's outrageous. Basically, everybody's a criminal, and if you step a little bit too out of line or become too much of a problem, it's not too hard for them to make you a criminal. They do find it a lot easier, though, manipulating the masses, turning people against each other. It works. Just look at America. Look at the world. They divide and conquer. It's so much easier They don't have to actually use the criminal element part to their advantage. They're able to just, cause infighting. Everybody gets divided, fight each other, and lose focus. It works so well that right now we're seeing division everywhere, and all the major headlines and the major news is division. You have, the whole border issue going on, and then you get the let's push Americans versus Mexicans. We'll do it that way, and we'll flood them in, and the people will attack, the people that are coming in, even though we're telling them to come. We're telling them how to get in. But all the people that are getting angry a lot of times are not going after who's doing it. The whole white versus black has been pushed for how many years now? Palestinians versus Israelis. Ukrainian versus Russian. They're dividing and conquering. And when you look at it at the global scale, everything that's going on, whether it be Egypt, Greece, this is worldwide. And I think we're reaching some type of tipping point. And we have to really start getting into offices and dismantling the infrastructure that's going to allow for a collapse and transformation into more of a global governance. And it's not that we don't want a global community. It's not that we don't want people to be able to interact with each other and free exchange with people. Again, the whole, well, we send jobs over to China and screw them. Then they're in slave conditions. Look, see what it's all. And we forget, well, these are governments doing this. That doesn't mean we need to be anti-Chinese. You get the so pro-nationalist type people that they're like, oh, you don't buy no Japanese car, Chinese car, Korean car. And you don't realize it's not really about that. The only reason it becomes about that is because of all the monetary manipulation throughout all the different countries. Because of the taxation and the manipulation of that money that causes, well, we'll just ship them all over there and pay these people less. It's because governments allow this total manipulation of the money that they can make it, less over there. If we truly had a free society throughout the world, people could value their labor for themselves. I'm willing to do this for this. If not, I'll go do my own thing. Many people have talents that they don't need to be enslaved to corporations or a factory. If they choose to take those talents and start their own business, it makes it easier in a freer society than it does in a society that you have to pay all the right people off before you're allowed to operate. Get the right permits, get the right license, get all this. And, that's one thing the internet's done is, made it easier for people to do business. And a lot of people see Bitcoin the same way. There's small little, websites selling stuff, and they only do in Bitcoin. You know, there's so many different things out there that we need to implement that in our everyday lives too. We need to kind of let go of this whole ideology that, well, we need government to regulate something. Well, yeah, they're going to regulate it until you pay the right, you know, fees for a permit, and then you can go ahead and operate. And if you have enough money, you don't have to abide by the rules, but you'll have to pay a fine. Okay, another interesting thing. This one out of benswan.com. And iOS tech experts claim that Lois Lerner's hard drive was only scratched. And I'm going to go ahead and play this here.
I just started using a site called AnthemVault.com. It links directly to a bank account, allows you to buy and sell gold and silver just as easily as you would, say, Bitcoin. Right now, Anthem Vault is giving away free gold and silver to everyone who opens a free account by clicking on the link in this video. And by clicking here, you're going to be entered into the Anthem Vault $500 gold and silver giveaway contest. Click on this video. See for yourself. It's the future of gold.
It's good to see you again, Commissioner. I want to read a quote to you from June of 2014. I want you to tell me if you know who said it, okay? We confirm that backup tapes from 2011 no longer existed because they have been recycled pursuant to the IRS normal policy. Do you know who said that?
Sounds like me.
It is you. Can you tell us who we is in that quote?
The we is the IRS. I tend to take responsibility for the agency and talk about it. I was advised when the draft report was submitted to me that people had talked to everyone in the agency to ensure that in the course of our several months of looking for backup tapes.
So we is the royal we, just speaking on behalf of the entire IRS. How about the word confirmed? What does the word confirmed mean to you? That you confirmed the backup tapes no longer exist.
Confirmed. When I read that, I asked the question and was told
by whom?
I don't remember who. We had 4 or 5 people who were working on the report. And was told, and I gather Mr. Kane said in his testimony that that was accurate as of June 13th.
What does the word confirmed mean to you?
Confirmed means that somebody went back and looked and made sure that, in fact, any backup tapes that had existed had been recycled.
Are you still confirmed?
At this point, I have no basis for not being confirmed. I do understand the IG advised me that they were looking at tapes. I have not been advised as whether any of those tapes...
Well, confirmed is a pretty strong word, Commissioner. Are you still confirmed that no backup tapes exist?
Well, at this point, I know the IG is looking and he hasn't found anything, so as far as I know...
I'm glad you mentioned the IG, and I find this confounding. I find it vexing. That once the IG is involved, nobody else can do anything. That is not supported by the law. Can there be a criminal investigation while there's an IG investigation?
There can be all sorts of investigation. What I was talking about is the
right, and there can be a congressional investigation while there's an ongoing IG investigation also, correct?
Of course.
And there can be an IRS investigation. If there were sexual harassment or discrimination in the workplace, are you telling this committee that you would wait until the IG investigated it before you would stop some insidious practice?
We would take whatever action was necessary, but as a...
Precisely. You would not wait until an IG concluded his or her investigation.
Can I answer that question?
Sure.
Our policy, and it's been my understanding when I chaired the Council of Inspectors General across the government, that if the IG starts an investigation, the agency will not themselves run a competing investigation to try to get there first. Basically, the IG advises us what the investigations are. When they advise us about those investigations, we allow them to proceed.
Let me tell you let me give you possibly an alternative view, Commissioner, which is that people cite ongoing IG investigations when it suits them to not cooperate, and they don't cite ongoing IG investigations when it doesn't suit them.
That's not my policy.
Well, you can certainly understand how a cynic might view it that way, right? Because there's nothing about an ongoing IG investigation that would keep you from doing your job. Just like there's nothing about an ongoing IG investigation that keeps the Department of Justice from a criminal investigation or a committee of Congress from a congressional investigation. There's nothing talismanic about an IG investigation.
In this particular case, as a general matter, my policy has always been if the IG is doing an investigation wherever I am, we won't interfere with that investigation. We want it to be independent.
Well, I mean, look, words have consequences, Mr. Koskinen. Nobody is asking you to interfere. You can have a dual investigation without interfering, can't you?
I think it's very difficult.
So you are saying that if there was an allegation of sexual harassment or racial discrimination within the IRS, you would not look into that until the IG had completed his or her investigation. Is that what you're telling me?
I am not telling you that. I'm telling you as a general matter, that's not what the IG would be investigating. As a general matter, those claims would come to personnel. They would be immediately investigated by our legal department.
Well, the IG doesn't have criminal jurisdiction. The IG doesn't have jurisdiction over legislative policy. The IG doesn't have jurisdiction over appropriations. All three of those are very important areas. So those should be ongoing even while an IG is doing his or her investigation, correct?
Actually, the IG does do criminal investigation.
No, sir, they refer to an entity that actually has the power to indict, which does not include the IG.
They actually, my understanding, like our criminal investigation...
You should go back. It might be the same people who gave you the understanding that you were confirmed that the tapes don't exist. So my advice is to be very careful who you take your advice from. And I'm going to say this in conclusion, Mr. Koskinen, I really could not believe the colloquy that you had with one of our colleagues about the morale at the IRS. It takes a lot to stun me, but that stunned me. Here's a piece of advice I would give. If the folks like Lois Lerner and others would have spent more time working on the backlog, more time working on their caseload, and less time targeting groups, and less time trying to overturn Supreme Court decisions they didn't agree with, maybe morale would be better, and maybe their backlogs would be lessened.
Would the gentleman yield?
I'd be thrilled to.
So, you heard that, and it says here on benswan.com, according to the press release, investigators...
I'm Ben Swan. Cybercriminals want to steal...
says here, investigators have now learned from interviews that the hard drive of former IRS exempt organizations director Lois Lerner was scratched, but data was recoverable. Not only did the press release contradict previous testimony claiming that all efforts to recover Lerner's hard drive had been exhausted, but it also stated that a review of internal IRS IT tracking system documents revealed that Lerner's computer was actually once described as recovered. IRS IT employees were unable to clarify exactly what recovered meant. Last month, IRS Commissioner John Koskinen had testified that Lerner's hard drives were unrecoverable and had been recycled or destroyed. Said he was unsure if the hard drive had been smashed or melted down, but he admitted that it was indeed physically destroyed. And there's been reports out that they have put a whole bunch of other ones up for destruction, and other ones have been destroyed. You can read the full article, but here's another part of it. It says, what began as inquiry into allegations of the IRS unfairly targeting conservative groups applying for tax-exempt status has grown into mystifying examination of the incompetence of the IRS and its inability to properly keep records. I think it's even more than that. It says here, quote, the committee has told no data, or was told no data was recoverable, and the physical hard drive was recycled and potentially shredded. To now learn that the hard drive was only scratched, yet the IRS refused to utilize outside experts to recover the data raises more questions about potential criminal wrongdoing at the IRS, said Ways and Means Committee Chairman Dave Camp, a Republican from Michigan. Representative Elijah Cummings, Democrat, disagrees with the investigation and sent a letter to the House Oversight and Government Reform Chair Darrell Issa, objecting to Koskin being called to testify a third time, declaring it public harassment of an agency head. So basically trying to shield him from having to answer why we now find out that it was only scratched. Of course, to cover up the corruption of government. Seems to be something that's pretty easy to do anymore nowadays. I think that the evidence of a lot of cover-ups is so mounting that I don't think there's a reason that any of these major politicians that are running all this should still be in office. I think it should be easy for these people to be tried. And, you know, there's people that say there's enough evidence for treason. I don't know if there's enough evidence for treason. But, you know, there's definitely enough evidence for a lot of corruption charges, I think. And IRS being one of them. Yeah, I think it's evidence that they had no intention on trying to recover the information on a scratched hard drive. Because most IT people would tell you a scratched hard drive isn't that hard to recover the information and data on it. And people say, well, it could be incompetence. Well, to have that level of incompetence within a, you know, government agency shows that they're not doing their job. And the cover-up of it and the what seems to be cover-up, because they're not admitting to these things. They're trying to not have to testify a third time. No one takes responsibility for all these things, Benghazi, IRS, all this. It should be enough to boot these people out. If you want to call in with your take on it, maybe your opinion, 718-717-8296. Feel free to call in. Again, that is 718-717-8296. Again, feel free to call in. You know, look at Benghazi. You know, there's something that went on there. That everything we learn about it shows either incompetence or outright corruption, either way. Nothing gets, you know, done about it. all this goes on while your tax money is used overseas. You know, if you want to talk about anything that we talked about tonight, you can call in UCY.TV or atnewsradio.com. You'll see the call-in number right there. If you look at, you know, and I seen something in the chat room about the Iron Dome cost $50,000 American taxpayer dollars per shot. There's counter arguments to that, and the simple fact that it's an American company that is also profiting, and one of them tends to be here in Indiana somewhere. I'm not going to mention the name, but it wouldn't be too hard to do the research. And if you look at the amount of money that those people make, there's a lot of profit that Americans are making off of that too. So there's also that counter argument. And again, you know, I just don't support either side. I think it really doesn't represent the people themselves. I think that's what it really should be looked at. It doesn't represent the individuals that are caught in between this. I mean, it doesn't represent the people that truly just want to be free. They don't want the war. They don't want the conflict. They just want to live their lives. They want people to just stop. Just stop. Both sides. This isn't about one side or the other. It's about both sides. Stop. But you don't see any side calling for that. Now a lot of people are like, I think going back's turning more libertarian, but then when it, you know, comes to this Israeli thing, you know, I'm not saying that, you know, Glenbeck's a bad person. I know people go, oh, you know, he's an insider and all that. He might be, I don't know. What I know is that, you know, he says I don't side with the left or the right, but he always leans right because of the Tea Party. And when it comes to Israel, he's picking a side. I think that's a major issue that a lot of libertarians forget when it comes to a lot of these issues. It tends to be that they'll pick a side of these issues, and it's like there's it's one of those things. I can't look at an issue like Israel and Gaza and say one side's right. They're shooting at each other. It's one of those things where they're both wrong. They both have legit, you know, issues going on. There's parts of the public because Hamas is shooting these rockets that aren't accurate. They're not extremely, you know, they don't have warheads. They're basically just a falling object. They're shooting these rockets into Israel, and it's not taking out, you know, the government of Israel that's attacking them, that they claim. And it's just going after people that live in Israel, you know, just trying to live their life, to buy a house, you know, whatever. condo, whatever they call it, a flat. I don't know. Then you have all the innocents being killed over in the Gaza Strip. These people, you're not going to make any friends over there. Well, we drop leaflets to tell them to get out. Get out where? Where the hell are they supposed to go? So, they go, well, we also rooftop them. You got seconds before you blow the building completely up, and shrapnel and parts of the building go flying for blocks. That's helpful. People are hiding, and this whole ground invasion. I don't see a good side. We're both sides that are just calling for complete peace. Well, they're not. You have to say, we are going to do everything to stop your rockets from coming inside this Iron Dome. If it was so accurate, they would be sitting back on that hill, eating popcorn, watching their Iron Dome take out all these rockets, and laugh, being like, we're not being hurt. Yay. We have protection. And we see that the Iron Dome really isn't that accurate, as they say, and it's a lot of money. I think one of the videos I've seen 9. I guess it's 10 rockets that the Iron Dome shoots off for every incoming rocket. That's not including all the aerial bombing, the double tap, send a non-explosive round into the building, let them know you're about to be hit, but again, the shrapnel goes for blocks. It's just all a mess. It's all a mess, and that's why I think even the sides that, let's say you live in a society that you're doing awesome, the economy's just roaring, everybody's doing great. Even in those situations, you cannot let your government start doing things abroad, outside your borders, that you claim to have. That's the first step. That this so-called legit government is supposed to have this border. Well, then they don't exercise military activity offensively against people. And it's defensively. They're sending these rockets in. You're destroying most of them. Some of them get through, rarely cause any type of harm. And then you take out, thousands of innocent people in return. There's something wrong there. And I think there's something wrong with your morals when you allow that to go unseen. Not saying that the Hamas rockets coming over are any better. That they're legit. Causing the harm is not legit. And no matter how much you think that, well, they have the right to defend themselves. The simple fact is you are going to create more enemies by what you're doing than are going to be destroyed by what you're doing. Because of the amount of innocence lost. Well, they're hiding behind kids. Well, you understand that then. They're putting you in that box. They're saying, we are, if we are actually doing this, putting rockets near children and hospitals and whatnot, they're putting you in that box, and you made a decision to say, screw that box. I'm going to target it anyways. So I think there's a problem there. And that's a moral judgment call that you make. That I don't think that makes you a bad person. I think you have a misunderstanding. I think what results in that is going to be negative. I think what results in that will be negative, but that's a moral decision I guess you are making. And you're taking that viewpoint, that side. And again, that's why I don't take either side. I just don't see how either side is helping any of these issues. And that's one of the things that we really have to point out if we're going to start truly addressing these issues. Okay, give me a second here. Okay. And this is on the border issue, and this is out of Next News Network.
Candidate Rick Perry might plan to seek the White House again in 2016. Right now, he's laying all of his immigration cards on the table as the Texas governor is calling on the National Guard to secure the U.S.-Mexican border. Perry was greeted with applause from the Republicans when he said,
"I will not stand idly by while our citizens are under assault and little children from Central America are detained in squalor."
Most of the families that have crossed the border into American territory aren't running away from Border Patrol, but instead they're turning themselves in under the assumption that they will be granted safe harbor. Border Patrol officials have detained more than 57,000 minors since October of last year. Back in May, the United States tangled horns with megabank Credit Suisse. Now the bank is reeling from its largest quarterly loss in 6 years. Chief Executive Brady Dugan told investors in a statement that the bank deeply regrets past misconduct that led to the settlement. The Swiss bank paid out $1.78 billion in the tax evasion settlement with the United States. During the second quarter, the bank lost 700 million Swiss francs, or roughly $780 million. In the same period last year, the bank profited over $1 billion. And we have an update on the missing body from April's Korean ferry sinking. A $500,000 reward was posted for tips about the location of Yoo Byung-eun, a millionaire investor. The Korean authorities connected Yoo to other investigations of embezzlement and tax evasion. Intelligence pointed to Yoo's financial indiscretions as the root cause of the ship's sinking. Nearly 300 people died when the ferry went down, a tragic event that cost the prime minister his job. Chang Han-won resigned shortly after the tragedy and the manhunt continued. Known as the millionaire without a face, Yoo's body was found today. Sucheon police found a positive DNA match for a body that was 80% decomposed and left in a plum field almost 200 miles south of Seoul.
Tragedy struck off Vietnam overnight. Typhoon Ramasan crashed through the northern region of the country, setting off landslides, floods, and evacuations. The storm forced more than 500,000 Chinese to evacuate their homes late last week, and now forecasters are warning of a new typhoon on the way, expected to reach land early tomorrow. Matmo is heading towards Taiwan and eastern China later this week. It will most likely be the strongest typhoon of the year.
While thousands of lives are in danger overseas, the cost of war is affecting Americans too. At least it's affecting the price at the pump. Shaken by the conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza, oil shot up higher than $103 a barrel today. Crude oil prices all rose, and Brent crude for September delivery, a measuring stick for international oil prices, went up to $107.71. The Middle East and Russia are both large producers of oil, and with all of the fighting happening in both places, there is little chance of a stable oil market. On the brighter side of the oil business, the United States is producing and selling more oil and petroleum than it has in years past. The new boom in business is going a long way toward balancing the trade deficit. Data released by the U.S. Energy Information Administration suggests that without this new increase in exports, the U.S. trade deficit would be $200 billion higher. The federal government still harshly restrains the export of crude oil. Boosted by new mining practices, U.S. crude oil production is expected to reach its highest level in over 40 years in 2015. The combination of horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing is a major point of contention with the Environmental Protection Agency, but it had reduced America's dependency on international imports.
A twisted criminal is now facing his penalty. Jordy Callahan was found guilty in March of capturing a mentally disabled woman and trapping her in his basement. Callahan received his sentence today from Judge Benita Pearson. Callahan and his girlfriend Jessica Hunt repeatedly battered the woman so they could harvest her prescription pain medications. They also threatened to hurt the woman's daughter if she didn't cooperate with their demands. Callahan and Hunt even encouraged their own children to hit the woman. Jessica Hunt is scheduled to be sentenced on Thursday. More than 8,000 women reached a settlement with Johns Hopkins Hospital today worth over $190 million. The Baltimore hospital discovered that gynecologist Nikita Levy was using hidden cameras to take video footage of his exposed patients. A female co-worker of Levy's reported her suspicion to authorities last year. When police found a pen-like camera, Levy was fired on the spot. He committed suicide just days after losing his job. Investigators found over 1,000 videos stored on Levy's home computers. Every woman listed in the class action lawsuit will have the chance to testify before the court and a forensic psychologist. Once the court evaluates the women, they will determine how much money will be rewarded to each of them. If they split the money evenly, each woman would take home $22,000.
In Washington state, calmer winds and cooler temperatures are helping firefighters battle a wildfire that has charred hundreds of square miles. The Carlton Complex fire is now officially the largest in state history. The Yakult burn fire chewed up 238,000 acres of land and killed 38 people back in 1902. Flames have ripped through 400 square miles at this point, but there is optimism now that conditions may be improving. The fire is still just 2% contained.
About 300 miles south of the flames, people in Portland are railing against an evangelical church for attempting to convert 5-year-old children at public pools and parks this summer. Protect Portland Children took up a full-page ad in the local newspaper when they learned about the religious group. Kay Schmidt is one of the organizers with PPC, and she said, "They pretend to be a mainstream Christian Bible study when in fact they're a very old-school fundamentalist sect." The group in question is the Child Evangelism Fellowship's Good News Club, run by Moises Estevez. Estevez told reporters, "Children are easy to manipulate. We all know that. We don't use any of the schemes and high-pressure tactics that we're accused of. We do teach that children are sinners, but we're not nasty about it."
And that, again, was Next News Network from YouTube. You know, when we look at society and the things they're doing, and then you look at the policies. You look at prescription medication, heavily regulated. I think I got a noise coming through my mic or something. Not sure. But heavily regulated, government approved. And you have old women being caged and beaten for this prescription medication. Then you see the war on drugs, which even, extends to marijuana and medical marijuana. Which crime from marijuana is pretty evidently linked to the war on drugs. It's not marijuana itself. It makes people passive. You have these drugs that are making people suicidal, and that's approved by government. But not the one that side effects cause drowsiness and munchies. Increased appetite. There's a fundamental problem in how society has actually accepted this throughout the years. And again, it's doing broadcasts, it's doing websites, it's out there talking to people, it's out there, bringing up these issues and actually having fundamental discussions about, what should be acceptable. Do you have the right to tell someone that they shouldn't do a drug because they potentially could commit an act against you? Well, that's like saying that, well, maybe you shouldn't be able to drive a car because you could potentially run into someone. And then that relates to the prescription drugs. Well, we'll approve these, but only under these conditions. Well, that's like saying, well, you can't have it because it could potentially make you fall asleep at the wheel. But if we put this label on here and say it's government approved, you might potentially fall asleep at the wheel and you can drive a car. But they want to take blood samples in states that they have legalized marijuana. And I warn people about the difference between decriminalizing and legalizing. Alcohol was legalized after they had their prohibition. Then it was legalized. They launched a prohibition on marijuana. Now they are legalizing. Now you are seeing no refusal checkpoints for blood. You best believe I would refuse. If they got my blood, it's because there was a whole bunch of them holding me down and taking my blood. Absolutely not just giving blood samples up to people. That's like, you're not only invading my privacy, you are then sticking something in me which is invading my personal being, my body. Not doing it. Not only do you not have a right to invade my privacy and my, I have my Fourth Amendment rights, which they're not just Fourth Amendment rights. That's just how we describe them. Coming from a country that looks at the Constitution, Bill of Rights, and well, you have your Fourth Amendment. Well, you have the right to your privacy, and you don't have to just give that up because you potentially could have smoked. Unless you are doing something that is demonstrating an unsafe way of driving, like swerving across all lanes of traffic, or running off the road, and running stop signs. Well, if they're doing that, it doesn't matter if they're on drugs or not. They're driving dangerously. Now, a lot of people go, well, how does that align with the libertarian philosophy? Well, again, I'm stating this from our supposed rule of law under the Constitution, but also in a libertarian fashion, in the sense that when on the public road, you do kind of, if you have a stop sign, you at least are going to slow down, make sure you're not going to run into anybody. Now, you know that what they call the California rule or California stop around here. I don't know why they call it that. But a rolling stop where you kind of roll up to the stop sign, might not come to a complete stop, and then you go because there's no traffic. Plus, it's four-way. Okay, I don't believe in ticketing for that. But if you go flying through a four-way, you are intentionally, unless you didn't see it, but then, you should be warned about it. Hey, there is a stop sign there. You need to pay attention. Luckily, you didn't kill anybody, otherwise you probably would be going to jail for taking someone's life because your inability to pay attention or care. But if they're just driving erratically and they harm someone, they should be held accountable. But see, this isn't what it is. You're allowing it to be legalized. I want to see the first state not to legalize it, but to decriminalize. I mean, completely, 100% decriminalize. No laws or regulations on the books. It's like a flower, like a dandelion growing in your yard. That is decriminalized. It's not looked at as a criminal action to grow it or ingest it. If you want to go out, eat the grass out of your yard or dandelions out of your yard, you're allowed to do that. It's one of those things that they will make everything illegal to legalize it. If it's not a criminal action, which means it's not illegal, what they consider a criminal action, then it's hard to legalize it and regulate it. Think about that. You first have to make it illegal to legalize it. If it's not illegal, you can't legalize it. This was planned out. And I hate hearing things about Monsanto. I'm like, these people out here, they're smoking this stuff. It's probably going to be GMO. Maybe the zombies will start appearing. Yeah, this is medical grade. GMO, Monsanto stamp bags. Munchies. This marijuana edible contains GMO. Oh my. But, I laugh about it now, but the sad truth is it's probably just around the corner, if not already. I don't have an issue with what people do with their own bodies. When you start causing harm to me or my property, then you will be responsible for those actions. But what you do to yourself does not affect me, and you will be responsible for your own actions when it comes to that. If you're out there shooting up all kinds of drugs, popping pills, and, smoking everything possible, you're going to deal with the consequences of that. If you're out there harming people or harming their property, you'll be responsible for that. And it's not that they did a drug, it's that they knowingly did something that they knew would alter them in a way that could cause harm, and they did that harm, therefore they're responsible for their actions. Well, they have an addiction. Okay, and if you want to try to help them get off that addiction before they do something stupid, more power to you. That would be great. We need more people out there to help others out. But it's not what they do to themselves, it's what they do to others that become, their responsibility to fix that issue. And you go, well, if they can't, what if they don't have any property, can't seize anything, they don't have a job? Well, one, you can either chalk it up and say, these people don't have anything, I can't claim anything out of them. But what you can do is bring, light to the issue. Look at this person. They have absolutely nothing. Now they cause us harm. The free market takes care of things like that. In a way of either people are going to help them out, or they're going to basically ostracize them and, just kick them out. Not really kick them out, but, the people are going to be wanted there. But, humanity says that there's going to be a group of people out there to help that person out. And maybe they're willing to not only help that person out, but help maybe you out. Maybe people go, look, this guy was affected, or this family was affected by, this person that has drug habit, doesn't have anything to remedy the problem, doesn't have the ability to remedy the problem, but we as a community can, come to that person's aid. We forget about the humanity around us. That there's good people out there, and they're willing to step up and help out. How many times do you see on Facebook about someone, either getting ready to lose their house, or they're fighting maybe the city and they need legal funds to fight, and people come out of the woodworks to help people. We have that humanity. It's right here. We gotta stop looking at these issues and going, this is why we need, force, this monopoly on force, to come in and say, with the barrel of a gun, you can't do this drug because you could potentially do this. You can't eat this food because you could potentially get sick. How about that one? How about, well, you can't go to the store and buy raw milk because it could potentially make you sick. Never pointing out that the simple fact that pasteurized products kill the good bacteria off in foods, which in the long run could have health effects that make you sick. But don't talk about that. there's a lot of people that they just regular milk and dairy products, actually have negative effects on their stomach. But they can eat raw milk, or, drink raw milk and eat raw milk products, cheese and all that. We got to start looking at ways we can just live free. We have to find the remedies, and I think it's in the way we live our lives to live free, is to be free. Thank you for tuning in. Stay tuned here on UCY.tv. All great broadcasts here. Take care.